My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 64 years old. I live alone in a small wooden house near the edge of a mountain town in Colorado. The winters here are long and quiet, with snow that covers everything like a thick white blanket. I have lived in this house for over 30 years. It used to feel warm. My wife Anne and I would sit near the fireplace, drink tea, and listen to music on our old radio. Anne was a painter. She filled our home with color. Every wall had something she made. Mountains in sunset tones, wildflowers dancing in wind, quiet portraits of people we once knew. But for the last 4 years, the house has been different. Anne passed away from cancer. Since then, the air has been heavy. Her paintings are still here, but they no longer speak. I covered most of them with cloth. I said it was to protect them from dust, but really, I could not bear to look at them. Her eyes were always too alive in those portraits, and I was not ready to face that kind of silence. I was an art teacher before I retired. For over 3 decades, I worked at the local high school. I taught students how to see the world with new eyes. I showed them how to mix color, how to follow the curve of light, how to tell a story without using a single word. I loved that work. I felt proud when shy students found their voice on paper. But after Anne died, I stopped teaching. I stopped painting. I stopped answering the phone. My life became small and quiet. I got up, made tea, looked out the window, and went to sleep. Each day was like the one before. Then, on a snowy Tuesday afternoon, I heard a sound I had not heard in months. It was the beep from my old answering machine. I almost didn't go to it, but something pulled me from my chair. I pressed play. A woman's voice came through the machine, soft but clear. She said, "Hello? I hope this number still works. My name is Clara. You were my art teacher a long time ago. You probably don't remember me, but I've never forgotten you. I work now at a youth center in Nova Scotia. We're starting an art program for the kids, and I thought of you. You helped me once when I really needed it. I don't know if you'd ever want to come here, but we would be lucky to have you. Thank you, Ms. Hart, for everything. Goodbye." That was all. Just a few seconds of sound. But I stood there for almost an hour, unable to move. I did not remember Clara at first. I tried to picture her, to match her voice to a face, but there had been so many students over the years, so many names. Still, there was something honest in her words, something that felt real. That night, I could not sleep. I sat in the spare room where Anne used to paint. I took the cloth off one of her canvases. It was a picture of a tree near our favorite hiking trail. I touched the edge of the frame, then sat on the floor beside it. I hadn't cried in a long time, not even at Anne's funeral. But that night, a single tear fell. I did not wipe it away. The next morning, I made a cup of tea, but I didn't drink it. Instead, I opened the closet and took out a small suitcase. I packed slowly, a few warm clothes, my old sketchbook, a photo of Anne, an old travel journal with some pages still blank, I put Clara's name and number in my notebook. Then I called the train station. I asked about tickets to Nova Scotia. The woman on the phone sounded surprised, but she was kind. I chose a one-way ticket. When I reached the station, the wind was sharp. The air smelled like smoke and metal. I found my seat by the window. As the train moved, I watched my town disappear. The familiar grocery store, the post office, the tiny park where Anne and I once danced in the snow. These places passed by like old dreams. I didn't cry. I felt empty, but also awake, like a piece of me had been sleeping for years and was now just starting to rise. Hours turned into days. The train passed through valleys, rivers, and frozen fields. At one point, a teenage boy sat down next to me. He wore a gray hoodie and kept his eyes low. At first, we didn't speak. I was drawing in my sketchbook, just lines and shadows, nothing special. After a while, he said, "Are you going somewhere special?" I looked at him and said, "I'm going to Nova Scotia." He raised his eyebrows. "That's far." I smiled a little. "Yes, it is." Then he said, "I'm Liam. I'm going to Halifax. Not sure what I'll do when I get there." His voice was calm, but I could feel something heavy behind it. Over the next few hours, we spoke in small pieces. He told me he had left home after a fight with his stepfather. He didn't know where else to go. He had a guitar but no money. He had been sleeping in train stations. I listened. I didn't ask too many questions. When I told him I used to teach art, he looked surprised. "I used to draw," he said quietly, "but not anymore." "What's the point?" I said, "The point is that it helped you once. It can help you again." He didn't answer, but he didn't look away. At one stop, we got off to stretch our legs. He bought 2 coffees with some coins he had left and gave me one. We sat on a wooden bench under the stars. It was cold, but peaceful. He looked up and said, "You think people can really start over?" I said, "I'm trying to find out." He gave me a small nod and sipped his coffee. When the train reached the end of its line, we stepped into a station filled with salty air and the sound of seagulls. I hadn't seen the ocean in years. I felt it in my chest like a breath I didn't know I was holding. Liam stood beside me, quiet. I turned to him and said, "I don't know what you're looking for, but I do know someone who helps people find their way. Come with me, just to meet her." He looked unsure. "Won't that be weird?" I smiled gently. "Yes, but weird isn't always bad." And so we walked together out of the station, 2 people who barely knew each other, stepping into a place we had never been, pulled forward not by plans, but by a small, strange thing that neither of us had said out loud. It was not joy, not yet, but it was something close. Maybe it was the first sign of hope. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. We walked out of the station into a quiet town full of sea wind and wooden houses. The sky was soft and gray. I had called Clara the night before to tell her we were arriving. She had offered to meet us, but I told her I wanted to find my own way first. After so many years of stillness, I needed to move again. Liam walked beside me without speaking much. He carried his guitar on his back and kept his hands deep in his pockets. Every few steps, he looked at the ocean like he was trying to remember something important. The youth center was in a small white building near the harbor. A blue sign outside said, "Harbor House, Youth Arts and Learning." The front yard had a tiny garden, even in the cold. Inside, the space was bright with color. The walls had drawings and paintings, some rough, some full of feeling. We stepped into the front room where a few teenagers were painting at a long table. A woman stood at the far end, helping a boy clean his brushes. When she turned and saw me, she smiled. "Ms. Hart," she said, walking over. "You came." I looked at her carefully. Clara had short brown hair now, a soft sweater with paint on the sleeves, and eyes that held something strong. She looked older than I remembered, but her smile had the same warmth I must have seen long ago. "I wasn't sure I would," I said. "But here I am." She hugged me. I wasn't used to being touched, but it felt natural. She pulled back and looked at Liam. "This is Liam," I said. He's just arrived too." Clara held out her hand. "Welcome," she said simply. "We've got food, warmth, and some peace. That's a start." She showed us around the center. There was a kitchen with tea and toast, a reading room full of soft chairs, and a back room filled with art supplies. There were no sharp corners, no loud voices, just quiet energy. Liam followed us but kept close to the doorways, as if ready to leave at any moment. "You can stay here a few days," Clara told us. "We have some guest space. No pressure. Just rest." That night, I lay in a small bedroom that smelled like lemon soap and paint. There was a clean blanket and a window that looked out at the sea. For the first time in a long while, I felt something like safety. I didn't dream, but I slept deeply. In the morning, Clara made eggs and toast. Liam sat across from me, drinking tea. He looked tired, but more awake than the day before. "What are you going to do today?" he asked. I looked around. The sun was coming through the windows. The young people were slowly arriving, taking out sketchbooks and pencils. "I think I'll paint," I said. He nodded, and for a moment we just sat in the quiet. I went to the back room, opened a drawer, and took out a brush. I picked up a canvas and sat down. My hands shook a little. It had been years. But as I touched the brush to the surface, I felt something inside me loosen. I painted the tree from Anne's favorite trail, the same one in her painting, but this time I made the leaves brighter, the light warmer. I didn't follow any rules. I just let my heart speak. After a while, I felt someone watching. Liam stood behind me, his guitar still on his back. He said nothing, but I saw his eyes move with care across the canvas. "That's beautiful," he said. "Would you like to try something?" I asked. He shrugged. "I don't know how anymore." "That's not true," I said. "You never lose it. You just forget where you left it." He sat down across from me. I gave him a pencil and paper. He didn't draw right away, but his hand rested on the page like it was remembering. After some minutes, he started. Slow lines. Careful shapes. A face began to appear. His mother, I think, though he didn't say. Later, Clara asked if I wanted to lead a small session. Just something simple. A few of the kids were curious. I felt nervous. My hands were cold. But when I stood in front of the table and began to speak, something shifted. My voice was softer than I remembered, but it didn't shake. "Art," I said, "is not about getting things perfect. It's about showing what's real. Even if it's messy. Even if it hurts." One girl raised her hand. "What if I don't know what to paint?" "Then start with a color," I said. "Pick the one that matches how you feel. That's enough." They listened. Not because I was loud, but because I was honest. Over the next few days, Liam stayed. He helped clean brushes, carried chairs, even made soup once. He still didn't talk much, but he was present. One evening, I found him alone in the music room, playing a quiet tune on his guitar. I stood outside the door, listening. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of feeling. When he saw me, he stopped. "Sorry," he said. "Don't be," I replied. "That was lovely." "I used to play for my sister," he said. "Before she got sick." He didn't say more. I didn't ask. I just sat beside him, and we stayed like that, with the music between us. One morning, Clara invited me to a local cafe. We walked through the chilly streets, scarves wrapped tight. She ordered us tea and a small plate of lemon cake. "You're helping already," she said. "I can see it in their faces." I looked out the window. The sea was gray and full of movement. "I'm not sure what I'm doing," I said. She smiled. "That's okay. Just being here is enough." I told her about Anne, about the house, the covered paintings, the silence that lived with me. She listened without interrupting. "I was in a dark place once," she said. "I think you knew, even if I didn't say anything. You left a note in my sketchbook. Just one sentence. You see the world in a special way. Don't let it go dark." That line kept me alive longer than you know. I felt tears in my eyes, not from sadness, from something else. Connection. That evening, I walked alone to the beach. The sky was pink and orange. I took off my gloves and held the cold air in my hands. I thought of Anne, of the day we first met in art school, of the way she laughed with her whole face. I didn't feel empty. I felt full. Not full of joy, maybe, but of life. When I returned to the center, Liam was waiting on the steps. "Where were you?" he asked. "Just walking," I said. He looked nervous. Then he held out a piece of paper. It was a drawing of the train, of the bench where we sat under the stars. "It's not finished," he said. "It doesn't need to be," I replied. He smiled. "A real one, small and slow." I smiled back. That night, as I sat on my bed, I opened my sketchbook and wrote something at the top of a clean page. This is not the end of my story. This is the page where I begin again. A month passed quietly at the youth center. The days had a soft rhythm. In the mornings, I made tea and sat by the window. I watched the light change over the sea. Then I walked to the art room and helped the young people with their projects. They were not always easy. Some were angry, some were shy, but each one carried a deep story, and slowly they started to share. They didn't always speak their pain. They let it out through color, through lines, through shapes that words could not hold. Liam stayed longer than he expected. He still carried his sadness, but he was changing. He started drawing again, and not just for himself. He helped one of the younger boys sketch a portrait of his dog. He even led a short guitar session during art hour. His music had a quiet power. I saw the way the others looked at him with respect. I never told him what I saw. I didn't need to. He felt it in the room. That was enough. One Sunday morning, Clara came to find me in the studio. She had a soft smile on her face and a question in her eyes. "There's something I'd like to ask," she said. "The school down the road wants to start an art club. Nothing formal, just a weekly group. I thought you might want to lead it." I felt a rush of fear at first. My hands were still full of old doubt, but something inside me whispered that it was time. "I'll go," I said. "Let's try." The school was a small building with bright walls and a playground that faced the sea. Inside, the art room smelled like paper and old wood. 10 students waited around a long table. They looked curious and a little nervous. I smiled at them and sat down. "My name is Evelyn," I began. "I've been a teacher for many years, and I've also been very lost. But art helped me find my way again. I hope it can do the same for you." We started simply. I gave them paper and asked them to draw a feeling. Any feeling. At first they looked confused. Then they began to move their pencils. Some drew storms. Some drew birds. One girl drew a door with light behind it. When I asked what it meant, she said, "It's what I hope to find." That afternoon, as I walked back to the center, I felt a quiet pride, not for teaching, not for doing something big, but for showing up, for saying yes, for choosing to begin again. Later that week, Clara asked if I would speak at the community center's story night. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken in front of a group in years. But she said, "You don't have to perform. Just tell the truth." So on Friday evening, I stood in a room full of candles and folded chairs. The children were sitting on the floor. The adults stood along the back wall. I held a small paper in my hand, but I didn't read from it. I spoke from memory. "My name is Evelyn Hart," I said. "For most of my life, I taught art. Then I lost my wife, and I thought I had lost myself too. I stopped painting. I stopped teaching. I lived in silence. But then someone called me. She remembered something I had said long ago, something I had forgotten myself." The room was very still. Even the youngest children were quiet. I came here because of that voice, and I stayed because of what I found. I found young people who are strong. I found kindness in places I did not expect. I found that art does not heal everything, but it opens the heart so healing can begin. When I finished, people clapped softly, not loudly, but with warmth. One girl came up to me after and said, "When you talk, I feel like I can breathe better." I bent down and thanked her. Her words stayed with me for days. A few weeks later, Liam received a phone call. It was from his mother. She had been looking for him. At first, he didn't want to speak to her, but after some time, he agreed. I sat with him while he dialed. His voice was quiet, and his hands shook, but he spoke with truth. He said how hurt he had been, how lost. She cried on the other end. She didn't ask him to come home. She just said she was proud of him. That night, Liam knocked on my door. He stood there with his sketchbook in his hand. "I'm thinking about staying in town," he said. "Maybe getting a job. Maybe helping out at the center." I smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea." He held out the sketchbook to me. "I drew something. For you." It was a picture of the train station with two figures walking side by side, their backs to the viewer. One held a guitar. The other carried a suitcase. "I think this is where my life started again," he said. I didn't answer. I just hugged him, not tightly, but with quiet strength. That weekend, Clara gave me a gift. It was a simple wooden sign with words carved into it. She had hung it above the art room door. It said, "This is not the end of your story." One afternoon, I stood on the beach with my shoes in my hands and the water touching my feet. The wind was cool and the waves moved gently. I thought of Anne. I still missed her. I always would, but I no longer felt lost in that missing. I felt full of her, not empty from her absence. As I looked at the sea, I whispered, "I'm living again. I wish you could see it, but maybe you do." I walked back up the hill, back to the center, back to the children who waited with open eyes and open hands. I was not the same woman who arrived on the train with a suitcase full of silence. I was someone new, someone who had found a reason to teach again, not just with brushes, but with presence, with patience, with love. And so the story goes on. Not perfect, not easy, but real and full of color. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.